All right, what's up, guys? So this is going to be the PowerPoint, or I'm sorry, the Google slide that we're going to use for all of Unit One. This is going to cover what we like to call the colonial era. Now, for those of you who don't know, okay, a colony is a group of people that can be established, that can maybe move from place to place. But in this case, England, okay, as well as all sorts of other countries like the Dutch, the Irish. Okay, there's going to be several people who form these colonies that we're going to have. And what you need to understand is that not all of these colonies, what we are going to know later on as the 13 original colonies, um, are not all the same. Okay, and they also don't produce the same thing. They don't work the same way. But as we know, or as you will know, these are the colonies that are going to come together to help us form uh, what we now have as the United States. Okay. Um, so, real quick, I am pulling up this copy that is already inside of your Google Classroom under the first module. Um, real quick. All right, so a few things. You don't really have to worry about these first few slides. Um, all that they're doing is just kind of talking about what we're going to be doing. But this was like if we had a traditional day one, day two, day three, day four, day five session. Okay. Now, what you need to see here are our key concepts. Okay. If you'll notice, for those of you who have paid attention, these are also on your vocabulary sheet. Okay. We're going to talk about mercantilism. Okay. Mercantilism. Okay. However you want to say it, but that is how you really need to say it. Okay. Transatlantic trade, Southern colonies, New England colonies, Mid Atlantic colonies, European cultural diversity, foodways, the Middle Passage, self governance, salutary neglect, or salutary neglect. That's another one that people kind of mess up. The Great Awakening, and traditional authority. All right, so the reason I wanted to show you this map was if you will look, okay, all of these different lines, okay, these are all different pathways of explorers. Now, let me ask you, do you notice one right here? You should. Okay, this is Christopher Columbus. He's actually going to land first in the Dominican Republic in what they call the Puerto Plata, which is the port of silver. He thought he was in India because that's where he was originally trying to get to, and that is where the term comes from, Indians. Okay, so that's why Native Americans that we have here in America, that's why they're called Indians, because at first he thought he had landed in India, so that's what he called the natives. So understand, all of these different lines that you see are going to be different explorations. So if you'll notice, okay, we weren't the first ones here. Okay, there's going to be a lot of different explorations. There's going to be a lot of new passages found. If you'll notice, like the St. Lawrence River that runs in far North America and through parts of Canada. Okay, it also goes through the Great Lakes all the way down what we know as the Mississippi River, the Hudson Bay. Okay, which is going to be founded by Hudson, if you didn't know that. Okay, but just quick glance. This right here is kind of where we're going to see the world uh, unfold. So understand, if you'll look, where do a lot of these places come out of? England, the Netherlands, which is later going to be known as like the Dutch, France, and of course Spain. Now, if you'll notice, Spain did a lot of explorations in South America, mostly in Mexico, and then like the southeastern and southwestern regions of uh, North America. Okay. All right. So this is going to set up your mercantilism type situation. Okay, if you'll notice, each of these servants, okay, or these maids, they all have colony written on them. Okay, and each one of them holds something great that can be given in return: gold and silver, foodstuffs, raw materials. So if you've ever been to a dinner where someone serves you, okay, imagine the colonies as servants to the mother country, which in our case is England. Okay, So, mercantilism, here's how it works. England, when they first started setting up a lot of their colonies, when they decided, hey, we are going to make the North American colonies ours, okay, not anyone else but us, okay, we want gold. So they come here and they say, we're going to establish a colony, let's have gold. But the problem is, we don't have gold, but we do have raw materials, such as cotton. Well, then that cotton, in turn, goes back to England because England can buy it cheap. Why? Because they own it. Okay, so since they own it, they buy it, they take it back, and once they take it back, they make stuff out of it. And then what do you think they do when they make stuff out of it? They sell it back to the colonies. Makes no sense, right? The colonies obviously don't have a lot of money because England paid them for that cotton, but what did you notice? They bought it for cheap. Okay, and they don't allow them to make their own cloth. If you actually get caught making it, you get in trouble. Okay, so where they're not able to afford it, it makes the Americans, or I'm sorry, the colonists, do what? Okay, it puts them in debt. Okay, if you can't afford to buy something, but you're having to buy it anyways because you have to have it, and you can't produce your own, you go in debt. Okay, which means you're constantly having to work for the other system, and that is what mercantilism is, guys. Understand that the colonies were being taken advantage of; they were being screwed over. Okay, so they produce the raw materials, they get paid cheap for the raw materials, and then they have to buy what they sent their materials to make for way more than they made off of the materials that was sent over to make that. Okay, so understand that's how it works. So, the founders of the British colonies were greatly influenced by what we know as mercantilism. Okay, mercantilism is an economic concept where the colonies served only to provide raw materials to the English businesses. Then, the English businesses used the raw materials to make finished goods and then sell the finished goods back to the colonists. So, like I said, we got screwed over here. We're making it, we send it, we get paid cheap, they make something out of it, and then sell it for a lot. That's not fair. But that's how they did it. That's how they make money. But also understand that they weren't just selling this stuff to the Americans, not just to the colonies. They were selling this stuff all over the world. Okay, people paid high dollar for the cotton that was coming in from the New World. Okay, it was awesome to think about how new product from a new land was coming in. Okay, it was used almost like fashion. Understand that. Okay, so then you have the Navigation Acts. Mercantilism is the only reason that the Navigation Acts happened. Now, the Navigation Acts were just this. Okay, this is when like the Royal Navy from England set up their boats in our ports, such as Boston, Charleston, Savannah, stuff like that, and told us what we could and couldn't ship out. But they also controlled the sea, which meant that anybody else that came across the Atlantic Ocean that wanted to trade or anything had to go through them. If they were bringing something from Africa, okay, which is like the Dutch, okay, if they were bringing anything from here, Great Britain told them no, take that cargo to England so it can be taxed before it comes to the Americas. Okay, if somebody's trying to send tobacco, it has to be sent to England first. Okay, then this guy up here, he's telling them don't export any hats, woolens, or irons since these things are already made in England. Okay, so since they were already made, England would make all the colonists gather up iron, gathering up wool, gathering up tobacco, cotton, and send it over first. They didn't want these people making anything on their own. Why? For the simple fact they wanted to make money off of it. Money drove this force. The colonies were founded for money. Okay? Great Britain took control of the colonies so that they could make money. This was an investment to them. But these people, these colonists, they weren't slaves. They wanted to be free men, and that's what's going to later end up leading us into the revolution in the next unit. But understand, these are the things that start to lead to that way before the revolution ever starts to come on. Okay? Now, mercantilism. Consequently, the English and its business became stronger and wealthier, and the colonies became poorer and weaker. Obviously, that's going to happen when you can't afford to buy anything. Okay? Now, what if you had to look at this and say, does this look like? If you were asking me, I'd say a triangle. Okay, the transatlantic trade is also going to be known as the triangular trade. Okay, manufactured goods are going to go from England to the colonies. Raw materials such as tobacco, indigo, flour, lumber, trees, all that stuff to make ships, boats, indigo to make dyes, flour. Okay, it's all going to be going back to Great Britain. Okay, from here, they're going to be taking rum and manufactured goods. Why though? Why would you want to take this stuff? Well, I'll tell you why. They take it here so it can be traded at places like Sierra Leone, Cape Coast Castle, Lagos, Accra, James Fort, so that slaves could be bought by using these manufactured goods. It was a trade system. Once that they got these slaves, they brought them over and they would be taken right here to the West Indies, which is what a lot of us know as like the Caribbean. Okay. Once here, they then were brought to the Americas, brought into places like New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore. Okay. Baltimore was a massive slave trade city, guys. Also Charleston, Savannah. Okay. But Baltimore being the biggest one. Okay, it's kind of ironic because these places are very close to the heart of our country now, Washington, D.C. Okay, so just know that there's a lot of irony that's going to come in this later on in the future, like today, when we look at things. Understand that it's kind of bad at how this went. Considering we didn't want to be slaves, but we ourselves brought in slaves. Terrible thing. Okay, if you'll notice from here to here is what we're also going to know as the Middle Passage. It is a very horrible thing, guys. Terrible. Okay, this is when they packed slaves by the hundreds, the thousands onto ships so close that you couldn't move. So imagine you had to ride a boat where you didn't see daylight. You couldn't go anywhere off the boat to use the bathroom. Okay, these slaves had to use the bathrooms on top of themselves. Okay, babies were born. People died. They would throw them overboard. Sharks would follow these nasty slave ships all the way across. Okay, there's a famous movie, if you'd like to watch it. We won't have time in class. It's called Amistad. Okay, it's about a slave ship and a slave revolt that took place on the Amistad. Understand, there's not a lot of people on these boats that are taking care of these slaves. There's not a lot of slavers on these boats that are making sure that the slaves get there. Understand, there's going to be a lot of dysentery and a lot of nasty things that happen on side these ships. It's known as the Middle Passage. Very terrible thing, guys. Understand that. Okay. So, transatlantic trade. So, mercantilism, because of the need for raw materials, the need to produce manufactured goods, they are going to use it to create the transatlantic trade with the American colonies. Okay. Also known as the triangular trade, like I already said before, it connected Europe to the Americas, but also to Africa. So that's how you get the triangle. So go from like Europe down to Africa, across to the Americas, back up. Okay, all goods shipped to and from British North America had to travel in British ships and only on British ships. Understand that. Nobody else could do it. Great Britain at the time, guys, Great Britain was the most powerful country in the world. Okay, there's a great saying that at one time the sun never set on the British Empire, meaning that somewhere in the world they owned countries where it was daylight. So at all times of the day, 24/7 around the world, Great Britain had property. Okay. They did this though so that they could get the taxes off of it. Okay, they'd make money. It all goes back to money. Okay. Some goods can be exported to Britain only, meaning that if they are grown, the only purpose that they have is to go straight to Britain. They're not to be taken to the Americas. They're not to be taken to Africa. They're to be taken directly to England. Okay, so these restrictions were designed to keep the colonies from competing against Britain, meaning they couldn't have a capitalistic society, meaning they couldn't sell their own stuff. They couldn't make their own stuff and charge their own price for it. Okay, they had to do it in accordance with whatever Great Britain told them they had to do. So, If you're looking at this and you're looking at this little poster here, okay, it says offering most excellent fruits by planting in Virginia, exciting all Futch as be well affected to further the fame. Now, if you've seen this poster, this is like an ad. Okay, just like all your ads on Snapchat, just like your ads on Facebook, they're trying to sell you something or they're trying to intrigue you into something. Now, if you're looking at this, excellent fruits by planting in Virginia. What do you think the type of economy they are going to have in Virginia is going to be? Obviously, it's not building ships. Okay, obviously, it's not textiles. Okay, it is farming. Okay, they are going to make money in Virginia based off of farming. Okay, like I told you, each colony. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, each colony itself is going to be special for something, but each section of the colonies. Okay, so if you start at the top, you have the New England colonies. Okay, they're not all New England, but because New England's there, okay, that's where some of the first places were founded there by England. Okay, they call that section New England. Then you have the middle colonies, then you have the southern colonies, which for us Southerners, we pretty much well know what the southern colonies are, but we'll go through those. Okay, so look at the population chart you have here. Okay, in 1610, understand that Jamestown is going to be one of the first colonies to be founded in America. Okay, and it's going to be founded in 1609. Okay, slaves were not brought to the Americas. Okay, the first slave did not come to Jamestown until 1620. If I'm not mistaken on that, I'm pretty sure it's 1620. Okay, but look at this. Okay, at first you had about 50,000 people. We'll say 30, 35,000. Okay. And that is your white. Okay. I'm sorry, your Native American. Okay. Obviously, we know that there were a lot of Native Americans living in this land before we came about. Now, you need to understand that there's going to be a lot of conflicts that happen that cause that to change. Okay. Naturally so. Okay. You don't want somebody walking in your house and telling you what you should do every day, how you should wake up, what you can do and do not do inside of your yard. You can't cut that tree. You can't cut your grass. You can't weed eat. Okay. You can't fish here, especially when they've owned it for thousands of years and these white settlers just show up out of nowhere, the white man that no one's ever seen, and they start telling you what to do. Okay. It's not fair, but we are going to see that. So you'll see that there's really not even over 1,000 at all. There's just a few hundred. I'm sorry. There's no blacks at all until, like I told you, 1620. Okay, right in here you start seeing the red fade in. Okay, it still doesn't go up a lot, guys. But after about 100 years, it's going to skyrocket. Okay, the reason is it's going to skyrocket for this picture right up here. You have to have labor in order to collect all of the tobacco. Now, England wanted this stuff. They're the ones demanding a higher supply of the product. Okay, and the supply it could not be met with the amount of people, the amount of white people that were here in the colonies at the time. So more and more people came to the colonies because they seen a chance to make money as well. What they didn't realize was, yes, you could come here and plant all this stuff, but you're not going to get paid anything what it's worth whenever it comes back to you, if that makes sense. Okay, so the need for slaves is going to drastically increase. And so for over the next 100 years, you're going to see it skyrocket, as well as the number of white people or Englanders, okay, Europeans, and then of course the number of Native Americans is going to rapidly decline. But understand that we are going to have allegiances with the Native Americans. They're going to help us later on, but we'll get into that next unit. Okay, so the Southern colonies. Okay, so this is going to include Virginia, Maryland, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. So if you look at this map right here, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, okay, all of these colonies, okay, are going to be used to search for gold and other financial resources. But what you need to understand is that that stuff doesn't ever get found. Instead, The location of the southern colonies is going to give us rich soil, long growing seasons, and it fostered the development of a strong agricultural producing colony, meaning that we can grow cotton, we can grow tobacco, we can grow indigo, we can grow rice, okay? We can grow the food, the smoking products, the stuff to make clothing in the southern colonies. And guess what, guys? This is going to last for a long time. And still today, I promise you, if you drive across South Carolina, if you drive across some parts of Georgia, you will see nothing but agriculture. South Carolina, you'll see a lot of tobacco fields. In South Georgia, you'll see a lot of pecans, some tobacco, mostly cotton fields. In Virginia, you'll see a lot of tobacco fields and a lot of cotton fields. Still today, we grow this stuff. It's because 400 years ago, we did the same thing. And England knew that we could take advantage of that. So, like I told you, relations with the Native Americans are not going to go well, okay? Or as like they like to call them, the American Indians, okay? So, in the southern colonies, it became somewhat as peaceful, okay? But as more and more English colonists began to arrive and then move further and further into what they had as their lands, and it was, respectively so, it was their land, not the Europeans, but the natives' land. The relationship became violent, rightfully so. Okay, like I said, it's just like if anyone came onto your land, told you you had to leave right away, you had no clue who they were, you didn't know their intentions, and it's not fair. It's also very dangerous. You're going to become violent. And so they did. Okay. So the economic development, though, the economy based on agriculture's development of cash crops, tobacco, rice, indigo, and cotton. So understand that the good thing that's going to come out of this is A, it's going to give people something to do, such as grow their tobacco, the rice, indigo, their cotton. But the bad thing that's going to come about it is A, we're not getting paid enough for our raw materials that we're sending to England, and B, we're making the Indians mad. And they're killing us, and we're killing them. Okay, not a good situation, but for England, they didn't care. They, we were expendable. Okay, they could use us as much as they wanted to in order to do this. Okay, so review questions: how did mercantilism impact the colonists? Okay, how did mercantilism impact the British? Okay, so for us, it made us weaker and poorer. For the British, it made them richer. Okay, what was the significance of the transatlantic trade on the colonies? Okay, we sent raw materials. Okay, and they paid us little bits of money. It gave us something to do. What three continents were included in the transatlantic trade? Europe, Africa, and North America. Explain the development of the southern colonies. So the reason it was established at first was to find gold. Okay, it didn't work out. The impact of the location was because we found rich soil and we had longer growing seasons, and so we could plant more stuff. Relations with the Indians were bad, and the economic development was mercantilism. We were able to trade our raw materials to England. Okay, so let's look at this. So these are going to be your New England colonies. Now, what do you kind of notice about this picture? Okay, you see everybody sitting down, and if you'll notice, these are some people, and this is an Indian, and some people would say this is Thanksgiving. Okay, this is where they say that we get the whole idea of Thanksgiving. Come together peacefully. Thank you, God. We come together. Okay, these people have helped us. We've helped them. Let's have a Thanksgiving dinner for that reason. Okay, but what we are soon going to learn is that this peaceful um, congregation here isn't going to last very long. It's just going to be just like the relations in the South with the Southern colonies and those Indians. Okay, so if you'll look at these colonies, okay, you have the middle colonies, okay, which is going to run right about through here. Okay, and then of course you had the southern colonies, which is Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. They're the most fertile. Now, what do you notice about the New England colonies? Obviously, it's a beige color, so that means it's least fertile. So, are they going to produce a lot of crops? No, not necessarily, because they can. It's not because they don't want to. It's just hard to when you live in a place that has very harsh winters, mild summers. Okay, you really can't do that. And plus, you're also at the top of the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, which means your soil is very rocky and it's not fertile. Okay, all right. So the New England colonies is going to include Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. We'll go back to that and you can see them right here. Okay. So what we would know, okay, if you're a true Southerner, okay, you would know that these are like the city slickers of the North. Okay. This is where your big cities are going to build. Okay. You need to understand that these are also going to become your biggest port cities. Guess what, guys? Still today, they are. Okay. A lot of trade is going to come through this area, and still today it does. Mainly because A, they're old cities, and B, they're right on the Atlantic coast. Okay, this is like the first point of contact you come to when you come to America. If you ask people who live in different countries around the world, they know America based off places like California, places like Florida, places like New York, Boston, because they are close to water. Okay, that's like the first point you come to whenever you see America. Okay, so the reason it was established, Puritans settled the colonies for religious reasons. Okay, they had been persecuted. Okay, they had been looked down against over in England, and so they came here to get away for religious reasons. Freedoms. I'm sorry, tried to say freedoms and reasons at the same time. My fault. Okay, so the impact of location and place. Okay, so the poor, thin, rocky soils, like I already told you, and a relatively short growing season that made farming difficult. However, plentiful forest and proximity to the sea led New Englanders to eventually develop a thriving shipbuilding industry. Who do you think they're building the ships for? Great Britain, obviously. Okay, so because they had a lot of trees they could cut, they could now take these and they could build ports as well as build massive shipyards. Okay, this is where a lot of the wood's are going to come from to build up one of the greatest navies in the world. Okay, Great Britain's going to have one of the most powerful navies in the world, and they do it on the backs and from the wood that is given to them from the American colonies in the New England colonies. Okay, so in the South, we know that they're going to give things like indigo, rice, tobacco. Okay, and in the North, in New England colonies, they're going to give a lot of stuff like the fishing seasons, and they're going to give them a lot of wood so that they can build their ships and make one of the most powerful navies. Okay, they don't really have in England a lot of trees, a lot of wood, so they had to outsource. They had to find a new raw material source so that they could build these ships, and they found it in the New England colonies. Okay, so like I told you, the New Englanders did not openly embrace the American Indians, but relied on them for help in difficult early years for survival. As the English population increased, the colonists had conflict with American Indians due to settlement and ownership of land. So just like in the South, things start out kind of good at first, and then boom, they get worse as more and more people come. Because guess what? If the more and more people you have show up, you kind of got to have new land to give those new people that are showing up. You got to have space for them, and the only way to have space for them is to take that land from the Native Americans. Okay, so the economic development of it, the economy based on trading, small businesses, and fishing industry with the shipping of goods. Okay, remember lumber, okay, and wood is going to be one of the main trade points that they have, and one of the main things that they can do, okay, for positive production with England. Okay, so then you have the middle colonies. Okay, these aren't very big, but they are some of our major colonies that we still, or places that we still have today. So you have Albany, New York. Okay, the city that's going to be settled right up here on the Hudson River. Okay, but what we know as New York City at one time was called New Amsterdam. Okay, later on the city name's going to change, but New York City is going to be right down here. Okay, like the island of Manhattan. Okay, you have New Jersey. Okay, you're going to have Philadelphia, and you're going to have Pennsylvania. Now, like we talked about in these middle colonies, you'll see that they kind of have a little bit of both worlds in them. Okay, really all three. Okay, you have a little bit that's good for it. You have some of it that's really good for farming, and then you have parts of it, okay, like upstate Albany, New York, that is not good for farming and all that stuff. So think about it. When you talk about the Mid-Atlantic, the New England, and the Southern colonies based off the following map, okay, so look at them. What do you notice about these? What do you notice about all these? Okay, these are religions. Now, when you look at these, you'll notice that most of the South, they're Anglican. Okay, up here, these are congregational, meaning they have big congregations, like the whole town. Okay, if you've ever watched the movie, I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it's about Salem, the Salem witch trials. Okay, all that stuff. Okay, it's because the congregation, okay, they were a congregational religious society. Okay, they ran everything. They ran their government. They ran their trade. They ran the jobs. Okay, they took care of that stuff. Okay, but then you're going to have some Lutheran. You're going to have some Presbyterian. Okay, but with Presbyterian, they're going to break off. Okay, but you're going to have Baptists, Roman Catholic, Jewish. So guess what? You have a mix of cultures. Okay, and these are the early days of America becoming a melting pot for all sorts of religions. I mean, think about it, guys. The Jewish religion, okay, Judaism, okay, it has its own place in its own countries, and now it's here, located right beside a Baptist church, located right beside a Roman Catholic church. Okay, and if you'll notice, these people are not all from the same part of the world. They're from the Netherlands, Germany, French, okay, England. All these people are mixing together up here. But this is going to lead to something. Okay, so in the Mid-Atlantic colonies, okay, this is going to have New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware. Okay, the reason it was established, okay, for religious tolerance, okay, because where they come from, they were persecuted against. Okay, a lot of these places are actually going to be formed because they're being looked down upon by the colonies they were already in. Okay, because some people weren't as hardcore religious. And so they had to find a place where they could just be like, hey, we're going to go somewhere in the colonies, okay, not in your colony, but somewhere else in the colonies where we can just have our own thing. You know, we don't want to be as extreme as you are with this religion. We got to figure out a way to be tolerant of different things. Okay, be tolerant of different religions, be a melting pot, be a beacon on a hill. Okay, so the impact of location and place, these colonies were geographically fortunate to have good harbors and river systems that significantly shaped their trade-based economy. So you could get from the rivers to the oceans, and from the rivers and the oceans to the Great Lakes, and you could trade. Okay, you could constantly trade. So, however, the Mid-Atlantic colonies also farmed significant quantities of wheat and corn, similar to the cash crop production of their southern neighbors. So, relations with American Indians. Okay, the natives who resided there were typically relied upon for trade, when the English were not the target of war, as well, often the case in the other English colonies regions. So, just like I told you before, everybody's in the same boat when it comes to dealing with the natives. Okay, we need them, we use them for trade, and then it turns into some kind of battle, some kind of blood battle, some kind of massacre, whether that be for us or for them. Okay, and I don't want to say us because we are not uh, colonists living back in the day. Okay, we are kind of just a product of what happened. Okay, so economic development, trading, and agriculture based economies. So middle colonies, okay, northern colonies, trade only. Middle colonies, trade and agricultural based. Southern colonies, agriculture. Okay. All right. So describe how these charts impacted the colonies. So if you have all of these different kinds of people, do you have only English? No. Okay. And who owns us? England. I can promise you, these Swedes here, these French, Welsh, Scottish, Irish, African, well, the Africans at the time, they didn't really have a say so. They were just told what to do. So it's unfair to them. They didn't really have a voice in this. Okay, but all of these other uh, ethnicities, okay, all of these different countrymen, okay, do you think they're going to want to listen to what England has to say? No. Okay, all of these ideas are going to melt. People are going to come from all over the world, and they're going to discover that they want something that is called freedom. Okay, but understand that freedom becomes kind of a contradictory statement, and the Americas considering we're going to have slaves for another couple hundred years. Okay, so having this diversity, okay, having all these different cultures, all these different religions, all these different beliefs, okay, is going to be represented in these colonies. Okay, and like I told you, it's not going to go well. Okay, you're going to have immigrants travel from Scotland, Ireland, Netherlands, and Germany. Religious immigrants included Protestant sects, Catholicism, Judaism, Quakerism. Okay, the mid-Atlantic colonies were the most diverse because there was no dominant culture. There was no one culture that said this is how you should be, this is what you should believe, and this is how you should act. All of these people had their own ideas, and that's what's going to make this so great. Because you're going to have all these different people from around the world come together to stand up against a tyrant. Okay, so explain the development of the New England colonies. Okay, so the reason it's going to be established was because they want to establish get away from religion persecution. The impact of location and place. It's going to be used for trade, fishing, lumber. Relations with the American Indians were good at first, but of course it goes bad. In economic development, they're going to have a huge fishing supply line as well as lumber. The Mid Atlantic colonies, the reason it's going to be established is to have religious tolerance. Okay, these guys didn't want to be as extreme as those that had settled basically in the New England colonies. Impact of location and place, you could do agriculture and you could do trade. Okay, remember this is the middle and it has the best of both worlds. Okay, relations with the American Indians, like it said, they relied on trade with the American Indians, but it goes south. And then the economic development is going to be that they're able to trade, but they're also going to have a pretty well based agricultural economy. Okay, and then how did the European immigrants impact colonial society? They brought a different culture to every aspect of colonial life. Okay, so no one's the same, nor are they going to be the same. So, primary source. Primary source just means that it comes directly from a drawing, a write, a literature work. Okay, it says, when we have had some of these slaves on board my master's vessels to carry them to other islands or to America, I have known our mates to commit these acts most shamefully to the disgrace, not of Christians only, but of men. I have even known them gratify their brutal passion with females not 10 years old. In these abominations, some of them practiced to such scandalous excess that one of our captains discharged the mate and others on that account. Guys, this is talking about sexual assault. This is talking about murder. Okay, this is talking about just abuse. Period. Okay, these were not good men that brought these over, and obviously they can't be. Okay, if you're doing this line of work, this is the kind of person you have to be. To even think to do this to another human being, you have to be twisted. You have to be messed up in the head. And these guys were. Okay, these guys that brought these people over on what we're going to talk about, the Middle Passage, okay, and the Triangular Trade is what this is listed. So, like when you guys take your test, you're probably going to have an image like this on your test, and it's going to say what part of the triangle was the Middle Passage, or what part of the triangle does number three represent, and that's going to be number three, the Middle Passage. Okay, number one would be like the mercantilism, raw materials being sent to England, and then of course goods and manufactured goods being shipped down here to Africa to be traded, so that these poor souls could be put and packed onto these small ships. Look at this, guys. I'm telling you, it's a lot worse than what this picture shows. At least the picture looks like the boat is clean. Okay, understand that the boat would not be clean. It would be covered in pee and poop and stuff like that. Very disgusting. Okay, this is legit how they would be stacked. Okay, this is real. Okay, this stuff is real. So the middle patches that we talked about. So the portion of the transatlantic trade where slaves were transported from Africa to the Americas. Very, very bad way of life, a very bad way, very sad way um, to have spent the remainder of a lot of their lives and what's going to come within the next, 200 years, 300 years. Slaves were brought to the Americas on dangerous slave ships. Once in the Americas, slaves were forced to fill the labor roles in the colonies. And West Africans sold slaves to the Americans for rum, cloth, weapons, and other manufactured goods. So understand that there were slave tribes. Okay, there were African tribes, certain African tribes who worked with a lot of the Europeans who had settled along the western coast of Africa to gather up these slaves because they made money. Okay, their way to get away from it was to work against their own people and have them brought to the Americas. Okay, I'm not saying there's a lot of them that did that, but there were enough of them that a way they could make a lot of money. Because whenever you have, these Europeans who settle there and they need help, they need someone to tell them, hey, where can we go to do this? That's how they would do it. Okay, so understand that West Africans sold slaves to the Americas for rum, cloth, and weapons. Okay, they traded raw materials, manufactured goods for human beings. Very, very terrible thing in our history. Okay, understand that. So, like we talked about, these numbers are going to go down with the Native Americans. The first slave to be brought is not going to be until 1620. People moved here, they wanted to make money, but the only way they could make money was also if they had slaves to help them grow their crops. So the African American population is going to grow. Okay, we've already talked about that because they had to have people who had a niche for unskilled labor. Okay, people who lived in this lifestyle, and that was African Americans. African Americans were unskilled laborers who weren't smart enough. They couldn't really speak. They could just work. Okay, the population had its greatest increase in the southern colonies because they had to have them to work on stuff. Cash crops is what we call stuff like tobacco, indigo, rice, and cotton. Okay, the biggest one to begin with was tobacco. Okay, so there was not one African American culture. Slaves represented a large number of different cultures. Slave owners attempted to strip away the culture identity by making the slaves work with African Americans brought from different cultures. So what they would do was they would take this group of slaves and they would make them work with a different group of African American slaves who would come from different tribes, different places in Africa. That way, they couldn't speak the same language, they couldn't sing the same songs, and they couldn't have a sense of morale together at all to overthrow those who were holding them captive. Okay, so by doing this, these slave owners restricted them from being able to work together so that they couldn't be overthrown or killed themselves. Okay, I promise you later on in history, slave revolts will happen because eventually the idea of a non-existent African culture will go away and they will form their own African American slave culture in the Americas once more and more people start to settle and once more and more slaves are brought to the Americas to work together, and then they're going to grow, they're going to reproduce, and then they're going to adapt to the Americas. Okay, so architecture, the shotgun house plan. Okay, agriculture. Okay, they're going to bring us okra, watermelon, sweet potatoes. Okay, and foodways. Foodways are just methods of cooking stuff. Okay, they are going to cook barbecue. Okay, they're going to teach how to cook barbecue. So, the colonial governments. This is how it worked. You had the British Crown, King George. Okay, that's the head guy that's going to be about whenever we get to like the Revolutionary times. Okay, then you had the royal governor. A royal governor is somebody appointed by the king, by the British Crown, to rule in that area. Okay, he's appointed by him. He oversees the colonial trade. He has the final approval on laws, and he could dismiss colonial assemblies. Okay, colonial assemblies were elected by eligible colonists. My bad, guys. Okay, And then the council is going to be appointed by the governor. They can make laws, they can do all that stuff. Okay. So, salutary neglect. Okay, what this means is British policy that believed colonies would become more economically productive if they were not restricted by British policies that limited their ability to trade and govern. Okay, this is called the Mayflower Compact. Okay, so what this said was that the Americas, okay, or the colonies could have a little bit more freedom. Okay, they could trade a little bit more. Okay, so the first one of this is self-governance. Okay, self-governance means that the people are going to form their own stuff. That way, they can trade and do whatever they want to do. Okay, so the first one is the House of Burgess. Okay, this is in Virginia. It's the first representative form of government in the colonies. So if I ever ask you, if it's ever on your test, if I ever ask you an extra credit question, the first ever government to ever be set up in the Americas was the House of Burgess. Okay, second thing, the Mayflower Compact. Okay, the first governing document of the New England colonies. So in the New England colonies, the first ever thing to be signed was the Mayflower Compact. Okay, and then you had town meetings. These, honestly, guys, were the most powerful thing. They were more powerful. If you ask me, they were more powerful than Mayflower Compact, more powerful than the House of Burgess. Just because you had everyone there. And remember, in the New England colonies, everything, for the most part, was congressional, meaning it was run by the church, for the church, okay, and then controlled by God and Almighty God and those who led the congregation. Okay, citizens voted on a variety of political issues. Okay, so in town meetings, they used these as their law. Okay, they didn't need a House of Burgess. They had their law. They had the Bible, and then they had their town meetings. Okay, so if you look at this, these people are sitting around. Some people have fainted. Some people are trying to figure out what's going on. Okay, this is a religious revival. Okay, which is what's later going to be known as the Great Awakening. Okay, so what is happening to the number of churches in the colonies? Is this a positive or negative thing? So look at this. So in 1700, you had a lot of churches. Okay, 1780, what'd you have? Okay, these churches, the number of churches skyrocketed because look, all of these were way down. You had 33 Baptist Church and 96 Baptist Church. And then in 40 years, you had 457. So in the same amount of time from 1700 to 1740, where you only gained, 50 churches, you only gained 5 churches, you only gained about 63 churches, you gained 300 churches. Okay, you gained another 300 churches. Okay, all of this stuff, guys, is going to be because we bring religion back to the colonies. We have to have religion in the colonies, or so they thought. So, primary source analysis. Remember, this comes straight from O'Reilly. Okay, so the Enlightenment slowly helped undermine the power of traditional authority. Something the Great Awakening did as well, but unlike the Great Awakening, the Enlightenment encouraged men and women to look to themselves and not to God. So, the Enlightenment is what's going to happen after, okay, the Renaissance and stuff like that took place in Europe. Okay, and it helped people see that they had their own free will. They didn't have to have God in their life. They could do their own thing. They didn't have to have, you know, God and church telling them what to do all the time. But they found that the only way to make people whole again, the only way to make people honest again, was to bring back church. Okay, and the Great Awakening is going to do this. So, like it said, the Enlightenment encouraged men and women to look to themselves, not to God, for guidance as to how to live their lives and to shape society. Enlightenment thought, with its emphasis on human rationality, encouraged a new emphasis on education and a heightened interest in politics and government. Most Enlightenment figures did not challenge religion and insisted that rational inquiry would support, not undermine Christianity. So, Enlightenment wanted people to have their own free will, but it also wanted them to embrace Christianity or Catholicism or religion itself with accordance to just being a human. Okay, understand that you're a human. Okay, but the Great Awakening thinkers, they wanted Americans not to think that. Okay, I'm sorry, colonists, not to think that. They wanted them to realize that they needed to push through with the Word of God, and that is what would change them. That's what would make them this. That's what would bring together these colonies. That's what would make England look bad. Was that if we put forth our thought with the ideas that religion gave us this destiny, then we could form our own government. We could have our own politicians, and they're going to do this. So the Great Awakening was a religious revival that encouraged colonists to develop their own personal relationship with God. Okay, preachers stressed the power of the individual and to resist the power of the Church of England. Do not listen to them; they're bad people. Okay, as a result of the Great Awakening, colonists began questioning traditional authority, which led colonists to rebel against the British government and inspire the American Revolution. Okay, guys, I know this is a pretty long PowerPoint, but you need to understand these are the things that are going to lead and help us found our great country that we have today. Not all of it's pretty, and nor will it ever be. We can't change the past, and nor will we ever be able to change the past. But can we embrace the past? Yes. Can we understand what we've done wrong? Yes. Can we understand what we've done right? Absolutely. Okay. But never erase this history. Never erase the fact that America is a great place. Just bad things are happening. But if you'll notice, bad things happen then too. Okay, that's the world. Okay, so real quick, we'll go over this. I'll be finished, and you will have this as a resource. Make sure that you use your study guide. Your study guide goes hand in hand with this. If you'd like to, you can listen to this as well as have it as a resource for later on in the year whenever we begin reviewing for EOCs. Okay, so to find the middle passage. Middle passage is going to be that area on the triangular trade where slaves came from Africa to the Americas after being traded off for materials for manufactured goods. Remember, human beings packed into ships, terrible. What was the significance of the Middle Passage? It brought slaves to North America. What are the three contributions of African Americans during the colonial era? We can go back to it. And I'll show you real quick. Okay, they are going to give us architecture, agriculture, and foodways, but as well as unskilled labor. Okay, guys, they are going to be the backbone for the growth of American agriculture and honestly, just the growth of America, period. Okay, and anybody that tells you different does not know their history. Okay. Define salutary neglect. Salutary neglect. We'll go back to it real quick and I'll show you. Okay, it's just the British policy that believed that the colonies would become more economically productive if they were not restricted by British policies that limited their ability to trade and govern. Meaning that we needed the right to be doing stuff on our own. Okay, we didn't have people here to govern us. They were thousands of miles away across the ocean, and we were being neglected, meaning we weren't being given the right leadership, the right power. Okay, and so we needed to take advantage of that as colonies all together to try to figure out a way to produce that kind of stuff for ourselves. Okay. How did it impact the colonies? It brought us together. Okay, we're going to form those three things. Okay, we're going to have town meetings, which are going to be very important, especially in the New England colonies. Then we're going to have the House of Burgess. Okay, and then we're going to have the Mayflower Compact. That's number 6 as well. Number 7, define the Great Awakening. It's going to be a religious revival, bringing God back into our lives, bringing God back into how we do things, our politics, our ways of life, our economies. And number 8, what was the significance of the Great Awakening? Just what I said. Okay, it's going to bring us back to being more focused on God out of the Enlightenment period and using that as a basis for everything that we do. Okay, guys, I know I've talked a lot. I do hope you've enjoyed this. Um, it's hard not being in class to teach you all this. But like I said, history can never be changed, but we can embrace the facts of it and what has happened. Understand that it's not all good, nor will it ever be good. Um, Make sure that you do the study guide, or at least you look at the study guide. The study guide is going to be, let me get to it. It is right here in your module one of week uh, August 31st and September 4th. Like I said, you guys will have stuff posted uh, tomorrow, Tuesday, September 8th. I'll get some stuff posted on there. You have one more reading. I'm looking into having a vocabulary quiz, and we'll go over that whenever we get to it. So, thanks, guys, and y'all have a great night.